Hello there, Johannish of Whiskey Lore, and time for another whiskey tasting. And for those of you who were anticipating that I would be doing a Whiskey Lore Stories episode this week on Ireland, just to let you know, I am on the disabled list this week because, unfortunately, sometimes a change in weather, I think, kind of causes things to drain, lodges in the throat, just like a football player can't play if they have a sore hamstring. I'm not really going to be at peak performance doing a podcast with a gravelly voice. Actually, I sound very squeaky when I was trying to do it, and it just wasn't good. I push the voice a little bit more than I do so here. So here, I have a little whiskey therapy to try to pull me through this. So let us proceed and do a little tasting of an Irish whiskey. This week, I'm actually focusing on two styles of whiskey: American single malt, which I did McCarthy's yesterday, and then also going to be doing two more later this week, very unique ones, and I'm doing some single pot stills. So Irish single pot still is a style that I have since I went to Ireland and got to taste pot still whiskey and how good it can be. I decided that, that's what I want to seek out. I want to find it when I can find it on a store shelf somewhere. And if you're not familiar with what pot still whiskey is, well, the story goes that basically over time, distillers started using other grains or other unmalted grains along with their malted barley. And in Ireland, there is this notion that in 1785 a malt tax came along, and all of a sudden distillers said, well, screw that, we're not going to pay that tax, so we're going to go and make these whiskeys using unmalted barley along with malted barley, and a style evolved. Well, if you listen to one of my past episodes where I was talking about the Scottish malt riots that went on in Scotland, it's likely that around this time there was this influence of using unmalted barley. And honestly, if you think about it, distillers were using a lot of other unmalted grains like wheat, oats, rye. So why wouldn't they use unmalted barley? I mean, it takes extra time to malt barley. So if you don't have to malt all of your barley, it only takes probably 12% or more malted barley to get the enzymes you need. So I think it's a style that's been around a lot longer, but thanks to that malt tax in 1785, I'm sure it actually became much more prevalent in the way that people were doing distillation. So whenever you see that term, it's kind of hard to see on this dark gray label with gold lettering, but whenever it says single pot still, basically it is a mix of malted barley and unmalted barley. And that unmalted barley normally is going to give you an oilier whiskey, so should show up in the mouthfeel. It's going to give you more grain notes. I pick up grain and honey, which I tend to equate to graham crackers. And then you also get a peppery note that comes in, and that all comes from that unmalted barley. And the more unmalted barley that they put into the whiskey, the more those bits of personality are going to come out. So now, popular brands that are out that are single pot stills that you can find just about anywhere are Redbreast 12. That is a single pot still. And then the Green Spot, Yellow Spot, Powers has some, and in fact I'm going to taste the Powers later on this week, so stay tuned for that. But the issue I have with those is that Redbreast is a 12-year, which means it's going to have a lot of cask influence on it. And I don't know at this point whether the time in cask is actually stealing away from the personality of the pot still whiskey. So this is something I'm going to learn by doing some tastings of different pot still style whiskeys. There's a lot of things that can enhance or change a flavor, but those things that I mentioned before, the oils, the pepper, the graham cracker note, are things that I should just really expect when I drink a Irish pot still. So this is going to be a younger pot still whiskey. It is from Busker, the Busker, which Busker is the guy who's panhandling and playing music. They call him a busker over there. So that is where they came up with this brand name. So in case you're confused by it, great price point on all of these whiskeys. They really are maybe slightly more expensive than going in the Jameson direction. And I think you're going to find some really great whiskeys. I've done some reviews already on the Busker, and so here is the Irish style known as pot still whiskey. So 44.3% ABV on this whiskey. It is aged in bourbon and sherry casks. Not sure how long, but I would anticipate it's probably somewhere between at least 3 years, or it wouldn't be whiskey. I'm guessing it probably goes up to 5-6 years, maybe somewhere in that range. So on the nose, the alcohol is actually tickling my nostrils, so I can't really take a big, waft of this. There's nice honey in there, a little bit of like sawdust oak. I can actually smell black pepper. I don't always get that. Really interesting. Maybe there does seem to be some kind of age character in this nose. I think it's coming from the sherry cask. There's like a leather note, but it's just a really light leather note. And maybe let's call that like a burnt oil kind of a scent. Not off-putting, very light, but just something I'm picking up in that. Little grain note. Cheers. Got a little grapefruit in there. That's interesting. A little sour of the grapefruit, but not a little sour and bitter, but not oppressive. A lot of toffee in that. There's a burnt kind of, I guess it's probably coming from the bourbon barrels and the char from the bourbon barrels. Little bit of that graham cracker note in there, but very mild. Pepper is apparent. Pepper covers the tongue, brings some heat. The thing to remember about this pepper is that unlike a rye pepper and spice that kind of hits you down here sometimes, this all stays on the tongue. So, and for the first sip, it's a little bit heavier than what I experienced the first time I sipped this. So let me take a second sip, because it may be that I just need to build some of this up. Sometimes when you haven't had a whiskey and then all of a sudden your first drink of it is going to be a little bit stronger than when you come back to it. Another chance to nose it. Yeah, that pepper is right there. That's really interesting. It's like the pepper we used to put on rice. No, that black pepper that just stands out there. Toffee again. The char is down a little bit more now, and the pepperiness actually was very light the second time. So kind of a shock to the system the first time you go through it. The finish is long, not overly long, but it is long. But I don't know if it's actually a pleasant finish for me. It really is heavy in the char, And so maybe the bourbon barrel influence is just a little heavier than I would like on this. But the drinking experience throughout the rest of it is actually pretty good. So these are probably going to run you in the $25 to $30 range. I mean, this is a great bargain, man. After buying scotch, and scotch is in your $50 and up range, it's really nice to see Irish whiskeys coming in at a great price. Now, if you're in Ireland, their taxes are insane on whiskey, and they pay a lot more for whiskey than we do here in the U.S. So, you know, we can be thankful for that, I guess. But it is actually, no, this is a good whiskey, and it's, I mean, for the price point it is, I would say this is a whiskey that is, when you're hanging out with friends, it's not going to be the perfect pot still whiskey. I'm still on the look for that. Still on the lookout for that. But, you know, because there's a certain flavor profile where I want to see some enhancement in some of those areas that this is kind of mild in. And so I don't think you'll be disappointed by this whiskey by any stretch. It's not Redbreast 12, I can tell you that. But it is actually, I think, a really good value Irish whiskey pot still offering. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Have you had the Busker? Have you had any of their 4 different varieties? This is going to evolve over time. It comes out of the Royal Oak Distillery, and they are shifting now from using some sourced whiskey into going 100% in-house. But that only happened not that long ago, so it's going to be a little while before they get all their own product out there. But still, I mean, this is a quality product. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, if you learned something, and you know, subscribe if you'd like to watch more of these down the road. And until next time, cheers and Slainte. Burnt toffee. A little bit of that sherry comes through at the end. Just a little bit of that sherry's coming through. And maybe that's kind of where I'm getting a little of that burnt note in there as well. Interesting.